we do have a quorum.
We do not have Bruce, Burrow, Kim, or Tim.
But we only need 4, so we could get started, correct?
Correct.
All right. The first thing on the agenda are it's 2:03 and we're calling the meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda are the approval of the minutes from September, October, and November. We have looked at them, but we amended the September minutes. They had a person showing as a committee member who wasn't. And the others we have looked at, but we have not had a quorum. Does anybody want to make any changes to any of those minutes? Hearing no changes, is there anybody who'd move approval, and is there a second?
I motion for approval, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. Is there a second? Marie, I believe you seconded a meeting or so ago. Would you like to second this time?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed? The ayes have it and the minutes are passed. The items for discussion today are the measurable goals for expanding the marketing campaign. Karen, are you going to speak to that?
Sorry. Yes, kind of. We did reach out to Rumpke and West Rock to be on this call to hopefully help guide us through this conversation. But I think really, Diane, can you, if we're moving on to that, can you make that proposal bigger?
Yes, ma'am.
So when I think last month we pulled this proposal back out because we really hadn't looked at it, I don't think, since the pandemic started. And so when this was board approved with the, so the recommendation could move to design phase, but the beginning of it would be to look at these design questions. And I don't think we really got further than that. So last month we kind of pulled this back out to look at these design questions again. And the one that was really like one of the main things on here was that one about the campaign's measurable goals. So not even knowing what we're talking about here as far as the design of a campaign, just trying to figure out what kind of goals would we even have, and can we come up with goals that are measurable? So so I don't necessarily have specific things to say on that, except to just hopefully have a discussion today.
Is there anybody who would like to comment on the measurable goals?
May I make comments, Sandra?
Certainly.
Karen, if I recall, this is the only recommendation of the committee or the advisory committee that went to the board that it received approval to move forward. Is that correct?
I think I think the other one in the ICI category also did. But
I mean, this one has been out there for
yeah, it was one of the first
several months.
Yeah. years.
Actually, one of the very real issues is how do you, even if we, just for the sake of discussion, accept the goals that are listed here, how do we measure that? How does somebody see whether there's an increased commodity capture rate?
If I could, Sandra, if I could speak to that a little bit.
Certainly.
Some of the examples that we have is a commodity capture rate, and a commodity capture rate is something that can take place as a program overall, or even at the curbside. And the goal of that is to find out what material and how much of it we're capturing, as to versus how much is being generated in the community. So I think that is something that would, I think, be something that could be contracted to do a waste capture study periodically. It doesn't have to be a big study. It can be targeted to, a certain number of households or disposal facilities. But I think that one is definitely one. The commodity capture rates are definitely things that more cities are going to as a way to measure the effectiveness of their programs. So I think it's becoming much more common to do. So I think that one's a good one to do. I think it's one that we need to do regardless of what we decide here. It helps us to understand the effectiveness of our education and outreach campaigns, regardless. And we do have we already have an education and outreach program. Might not be considered a campaign, but we do have a program. But the second measurable on that would be increased participation. And we do track participation. If I could share my screen. Let's see.
Hello, everyone. This is Kim and Laura. Sorry, we're joining late. We've had some issues logging in.
Thanks for joining.
So we already do capture participation rate or availability rate. Let me talk about that a little bit different. Availability rate is that people have the service. It's automatically there, but they may or may not choose to participate. A lot of contracts are that way, where a small city or the urban services district, recycling is included, but a certain percentage of people do not do it. So availability rate is one versus a participation rate is a little bit different. But this is really kind of like a more of an availability rate. So you can see that we've always tracked this, and it even goes further past 2016. But we've been sitting at that 39 to 40% participation availability rate for a long time. So this could be a way that we measure, how good this campaign is being run. And I'm assuming one of the goals of the campaign is to get more people to participate. More people participate, we get more diversion. So you can break this down into the smallest of elements to do a neighborhood survey. You can do it a small city. You can do an HOA. You can do the USD, which we finally have a pretty close to a participation rate in the USD for the first time, and pleasantly surprised. It's much higher than what I had anticipated. So that is also another way to do that. You can even do it on the waste hauler level. of the collections. You know, how many people do they have garbage service versus how many people have recycling service. So that's another way to capture that rate. So I think that is definitely a way for us to do that. Let me go back to the sheet again.
While you're looking for it, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are these two different rates? Services are available but not used, and services are not available.
Those would be two different things. And the way that this number is calculated right now is that all waste haulers have to report to the waste district annually at their annual report to say, this is how many households that we service in 2020. This is how many we've got. This is how many households have recycling service. So if it's subscription wise, that's probably the easiest number to come up with because it's the individual household they're paying for it individually. Where it gets more difficult is when it's a small city or the USD, which it's universally provided, but people don't have to use it. That's where it gets a little bit more difficult. So, but that data comes to us every year, and that's where those numbers came from. Does that answer your question? I mean, to back into the answer of how many people are not participating or do not have it available, what you would need to do is back that away from the number of households in the county based upon census data. So if we had 400,000 households and our availability rate and participation rate comes up to a total of 300,000 households, then we know 25% of the households don't have it available.
I guess what I was thinking was, since we're talking about educational, they're almost different. They're almost different groups of people to reach through education.
Absolutely.
And I can see us realizing that at some point in time. One is nurturing, it's providing more information, it's encouraging, and the other one is taking a look at the services that are provided as a first step, and then maybe this other stuff as a second step.
I agree with that. And I think that comes into line with everything that we look at as far as education. Let's take litter for an example. Litter, everybody knows it's wrong, and you got all this litter, and you can measure you can measure how clean the community is. But the causes of that litter and the way that you attack the problem, it can be totally different. On the highways, it's covering your load. It's in a pedestrian corridor where there's a lot of foot traffic. It's, you know, the stores, the people there. And if it's along a road that has no sidewalks, the only way for it to get there is out the car window. So the way that you attack those, even the demographics, you know, young people litter more than older people. You attack it differently. So I don't think that this would be any different. We have unincorporated, we have lots of reasons that people don't have recycling. Our education campaign is going to have to target each one of those, or we have to have a strategy to take people's participation or the reasons for their not having an available way.
And not every education program has a goal of increasing participation necessarily. We found with our pilot of the Recycle Right program, where we're more educating about contamination and recycling carts, we didn't make any difference in participation whatsoever. So, you know, that's one reason to look at your goals ahead of time, so you know you can decide the best tools and campaign and messaging and all the things you're going to do to reach that goal. So, so although we listed a few possible things there that are measurable, I don't know, you know, I guess that's part of our discussion, is knowing what goals we want to achieve through some kind of very specific campaign.
Right. The
As
last
a-
there,
as a baseline, are we looking at national averages? Certainly, we don't want to do a study now during the holiday season because the recyclables are going to be far more during package season than in off seasons. And we're not going to be able to do a whole year study. So we looked at the national average or the Midwest average.
Bruce, I would say that we have some data already that we can use. I think the more that we can do it locally, the better. Waste is definitely one of those things that's very local. I think that, depending upon how fast you guys want to jump into it, having somebody come in and putting that out as an RFP to do a semi-waste comp study to get certain things, maybe not as detailed as what we did originally, but to get a pretty good ideas of baselines for what we want to measure would be something that could easily be done asking the board to do that. So I think that we can get what we want, and we need to try to keep it as local as we can and not use national statistics, especially for recycling, because we know that the further you get to the coast, the more impacted they were by the China's national sword. So they might not have availability of all the mills and stuff that we do here, which is growing all the time.
Do we have any idea roughly what a study like that would cost?
No. I think that the only thing that you can do is do an RFP and find out, but I would think that you could probably do a pretty decent waste comp study that's targeted, probably for $30,000.
Would you recommend looking at individual items that were being recycled or just whether or not recycling was taking place?
I wouldn't do the waste comp study for participation. I would do the waste comp study to see what we're capturing in the recyclables and maybe what recyclables we're losing to landfill. So, and that can be actually done at the curb level if that's the way that we chose to do it, meaning that you would sample both the recycling stream and the garbage stream. And you take a look at the recycling, how much are we capturing through the recycling for an individual commodity? And that's what I would like for us to do, is look at individual commodities, such as glass. How much glass are we losing to landfill versus being able to collect it in the recycling stream at the curb? And then if we find that we're capturing 90% of our glass, well, there's no need for us to focus on glass as a part of our education campaign. If we're losing a lot of aluminum, if we're capturing 50% of our aluminum, I would think that definitely we would want to focus on aluminum to get it into the right bin, which is the recycling bin. The aluminum's got a lot of value. So that would be kind of what we would want to do. So I would look at it as more towards the individual commodities within the recycling stream. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all.
No, that was a good answer to my question. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a thought too.
Go ahead.
For everyone who's not recycling, wouldn't they be throwing away 100% of their recycling if they're not taking it to a drop-off site?
That's right. It would be, that's where you would measure the garbage side to see how much of that material is actually going into the landfill. So
And what percentage of glass and cardboard?
Yeah,
and everything else?
So you would add everything up, all of the weight, recycling and garbage. That's one total. then you would take the individual commodities that's captured in the recycling stream, and then you would look at how much is going into the landfill, and that's what you break it out. This is how much paper is in the total waste stream. The recycling stream is capturing 40% of that. So then we know 60% of paper should be a target for one of our education campaigns. It doesn't have to be an education campaign strictly for paper, but it might be. So you don't know what you can target until you measure that commodity capture rate. We might be doing a great job at some of the things that we don't think we're doing a great job on.
One of the other factors, going back to what you said, is that I think it needs to be county-wide for the study if we're going to do it at Curbside. And I think that we may find not only different commodities to target, but we may find different areas of the community to target.
I agree. I think that we would want to try to do a representative sample from identified areas. Maybe that's from a small city in one part of town versus an HOA versus in one part versus an unincorporated area that's on a subscription-based service versus even the USD in the East and the West. So I think that you can tailor it to try to get a very good sampling of the things and areas of the different ways things are collected in our community and target those.
Pete, this is Bruce. Can I ask you a question? How are you going to differentiate between the pickup homeowners, but the industrial one? The industrial probably is 80% of all the recycling, where homeowners is only 20%. And how do you know how much they're throwing out versus how much they have?
Typically, Bruce, what you would do is focus on the container type. Most commercial and industrial is going to be collected either in roll-off or front loads, large capacity dumpsters, whereas almost all households and some small businesses are collected in cart-based systems.
Okay, you're keeping track still of, like we used to, of all the industrial, so you could add them both together.
That would have to be determined. I think that if we want to look at the different sectors of basically the way that we've broken up our committees, ICI, you can do capture rates for ICI. And that is, you flag the truck as this one is coming from commercial. This one's coming from multifamily. This one's coming from single family residential. And you can look at it that way. And we can set up the specs to do it that way. But again, we start to grow it. The more sectors that we do, the bigger the study, the more cost the study. And where are we ready to focus our education campaign? This one's residential. So, we can hold this to simply just do residential. And that's why I think that the study could be fairly inexpensive.
Yeah, your point's well taken, because the training or the education that comes out of it is very different when we start talking about the different sectors.
It absolutely is. And it can be the same item in 4 different sectors, but the way that you educate to recover it can be 4 different ways to do it. It's not the same thing, a resident and a business. Same item, same aluminum can, but how you approach that education campaign may be totally different.
But the value of the product, when copper now is probably $3.50 a pound, people may be taking it to the recycling center instead of putting it in their garbage, or aluminum cans. When aluminum cans get below 25 cents a pound, nobody recycles them. When it gets up to where it is today, close to $1 a pound, they may be taking it themselves.
I would agree with that totally. That's some of the things that we can't really control. And there's even people out there that speculate on metal like Bruce, if they hold when the price is low, and when the price gets up above a certain level, suddenly you got a bunch of people taking stuff to the recycling centers.
Well, and I think the educational piece, this is Kim, would have to be different for people who currently recycle, and we're trying to find out how much they're actually still throwing away that's recyclable in comparison to people who don't recycle at all.
It would be something that we would have to make sure that we put into our specs, that we need to capture that. Let's say that we have 100 total households. 50 of them recycle, 50 of them don't. We have to take into account the 50 that don't to see what they're throwing away for us to understand truly what our capture rate is. So yes, the answer to that is yes, we would definitely have to capture the landfill bound waste for us to see what we're capturing and what we're not.
I guess what I'm saying is that educational communication, I think, would be different for people who already recycle and they're still throwing some of their recyclables away versus people who don't recycle at all.
Yes, I agree. I mean, part of that campaign, number one, will be just recycle. For the people that don't, they don't recycle now, recycle something. Start with aluminum cans, start with cardboard, but get them into starting to capture some of that material. So yeah, I agree with you, Kim. It is definitely the track that we take on our education campaign will be many on, based upon the audience that we're trying to change. But, I think that we're already doing a lot of this. And the one that I would say is probably we already keep participation rates to a degree. And that's done annually. We got a lot of data going back. We can do better. We certainly could. But we have something. The decreasing recycling contamination, that is the Recycle Right program. And the staff will be making a recommendation to the board soon to have a part-time seasonal team that would do the Recycle Right. That's the tagging of carts. For your recycling really great, you get a green card. You're doing pretty decent, but you can make some improvements, yellow card. You're putting garbage in here, you get a red card and it doesn't get picked up. So that is improving our contamination rate, which makes better material going to the recycling centers, less cost for them to sort it, better value of the material. So it helps everybody. So we're already going to be doing the decreased recycling contamination, I believe. I'm certain that the board is going to approve it. And that, we hope, is going to be countywide. The one thing that we don't have right now is commodity capture rates. So if we want to measure one or all of these things, I think that is probably the best way for us to measure our success of a campaign. Education campaigns are very difficult to measure. I don't know how else you measure them other than the end result of your efforts. And I think that's the things that we're talking about right there.
In the event that we were to recommend the study that you're talking about, I think one of the things that would have to come in front of the subcommittee is some kind of a document that spells out some of the things that would be measured. You've gone through a lot and answered a lot of questions, but just recommending a study without some of the individual components of what would go into it, some of the things that would be measured, where would they be measured, who would do the measuring, which is what we've all just talked about. It almost sounds like something that's a more detailed version of our dialogue right now today is what we need for a future meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need specifications for what we would put into an RFP.
Exactly, because otherwise we're talking about something nebulous that we have been here today and know, but we're not liable to remember in 2 or 3 months, and we can't convey it effectively to the advisory committee.
Mhm. Well, we can see if we can't put together some specs. I think that there's probably, I know that there's lots of other cities that do these commodity capture rates. I think it's becoming more common. I think that the recycling partnership, who we work with a lot, would have some recommendations on maybe some specifications on how to do that. So we can certainly look at that for the next committee meeting to see if we can at least get us in the ballpark of what we want to do.
Well, and then I think that the step after you talk to outside people is just what you said earlier. We need to bring it down to Jefferson County. We need to take a look at how it affects locally, because something that's measured in Indianapolis may or may not be something that's effectively measured here.
Agreed.
And
I also,
want to say something? Go ahead.
yeah, I also agree that I would be real interested to understand how they do that, how they can determine what commodities or that would be something, because I can't visualize in my head, or I can't understand how they would be able to do that, to determine what commodities are not getting recycled that could be. So I would be very, very interested to understand or know how they are able to do that. And once we knew that, or knew what method they were using to capture that information, then I think it would be much easier for us to make a determination whether it would work in our area or for what we're looking for. But that again, I just can't visualize in my head how a company or advisory or consultant, someone would go about doing that.
I will try to put together like a methodology that's used, and I think that would kind of explain the how it's done, and then maybe some specifications afterwards.
I think the how it's done, knowing that would help me anyway determine whether I felt like it was a worthwhile thing for our area, and like I said, in order to make really any informed decision, that's a big key for me is how they would go about doing that. And then once I knew how, then I would have a whole lot more confidence in determining whether I think it would work for what we're trying to do or not.
Sure. If the committee's asking the staff to make to do that as a task, we'll definitely do that.
Marie or Patrick, what do you think?
I think it's fine. It's the more we know, the better informed we are.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Kim?
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. No, I agree. And I think that we have done a little bit of legwork in the past. I can go back through some of our previous meetings. I really think about 2 years ago and see if that still works, or if they've updated it since then. But I think we have done a little bit of legwork already.
In regard of which component? The methodology or?
Yes. But I definitely think the recycling partnership will be a great starting place as well, too.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things that occurred to me just now, based upon what Kim said, was that it may be entirely possible to do it based upon existing waste composition study that we did originally. Now, I don't think that the data has really changed all that much since that we've done it. I don't think that the waste stream has changed dramatically, that it changes the course of what we decide. But COVID has definitely changed the waste stream to a certain level. And I think probably still is. Whether or not that's going to be the new norm, I think everybody's wondering that. And, you know, a lot of the data that we look for, overall community-wise, is already there from the facilities that we already have. West Rock and Rumpke know what's incoming. It's just, you know, they have all that data. It's just whether or not that we want to take it to the curbside level.
I think that's the issue, because there was with the data that existed a few years ago, there were some very real comments that related to how wide the sample had been and how effective it was because of that, how it had been obtained. And I think that the curbside component would still some of those comments.
I would be interested in those comments, and maybe I heard them before. You know, we can go back and look at all that methodology. All of that is in the study about how it was done. And if there's valid points to be learned there before we do something else, I think that we take a look at it. We want the best thing for what we can get.
I'm not aware that there was any curbside done at that point in time, certainly not throughout the county.
It was done throughout the county.
Curbside?
Absolutely.
Not
at the, well, let me take that back. It wasn't done at the curbside of picking up people's carts. It was done by pulling trucks when they pulled into a disposal facility, and it was from curbside collection. So those trucks came from all over the county.
That was the area where I heard comments that the sampling of those trucks may have not been as complete as it could have been.
I understand.
Real quick, just that helps me, or just so I can make sure I'm understanding. So we're trying to determine a residential customer who may or may not have recycling bins, and they have residential trash pickup, and we're trying to determine how much recyclables are being put into their trash pickup instead of going into the recycling bin if they have one.
Close. We're doing that, but what we're doing is combining that with what's going in people's recycling parts to get capture rates of individual products. So what's going into the garbage, if it's, you know, we know that it's probably 40% out of residential. It's probably 40% of it is recyclable commodities. So we know it's certain commodities, paper, glass, cardboard, whichever ones. And, you know, how much of those individual components combined with what's being captured in recycling. And you use all this data. You don't look for just one thing, but you look at all that. What are we missing in the trash? What are we missing in recycling? What commodity is getting left out here that we are not capturing that has a high value? And then we do an education campaign just for that one commodity.
Okay. So like what you were saying with the trash truck that went through the neighborhood, picked up all their trash, and then potentially once that truck is at the landfill dumping that load out, someone's kind of analyzing all of that stuff and saying, man, there's a whole lot of cardboard in here, or man, there's a whole lot of aluminum cans in here, and trying to somewhat take that volume or what into determining that's what they're missing. That's what's not making it into the recycling cart.
So in the previous study, what they did was when they flagged they stopped a truck and it had stuff from curbside, just like you're talking about, they would dump it and they would take grabs out of several portions of that pile and they would sort it down to its finest level. I mean, they went down very, very detailed as to exactly what it was, weighed every one of them to find out how much of that material was there. And they did that, I don't know, 70 or 80 garbage trucks from all over the community. So that's how, you know, it's not perfect, I'm sure, but it was scientifically done to using weights and flagging these trucks as they came in, characterizing them into ICI trucks, residential trucks. What was the other one? Residential, ICI, self-haul. Into those categories. Then we had the construction and demolition. That was another one that we did. But that's how we got to these committees, was based upon a lot of the data that came from the waste composition study, and breaking them into those different waste streams or sectors.
That's very interesting, or I would think that would be very, very interesting and informative to hear that. Surprised people actually do that.
No, that's what we paid a lot of money for. And
Yeah, I can see that.
all that stuff is available. Let me see. I'm sure that it's here somewhere.
I guess I have a question with regard to the economics of it. To set the baseline, why would we want to commission a new study if we already have the data from the previous study?
Can you say that again, Bruce?
I guess why would we commission a new study if we already have the data from a previous study available to us?
Well, we don't have to. We can use the data that we have, but the one thing that we didn't get when we did that last one was literally using a neighborhood curbside bin part of this. We did it on a overall community based upon the trucks coming in, but you can do it at a household level, and probably get a more detailed analysis of what is there. So you're just, it's taken a little bit of a deeper dive at the household level to see what that behavior is, so that you can attack it through education. I can see there's multiple ways to do it. And Bruce, you're absolutely right. I think that we could use the data that we have to come up with some capture rates. And while I'm going to go ahead and share one more time. If you can see this, they did very close to, well, here's what they said for some capture rates. Actually, they did, and I forgot all about it. Executive summary, USD residential curbside. So this is what they did in the curbside. They found out that we're capturing 62.9% of the yard waste. We're getting 56.3% of the glass, 40% of the paper, 24% metal, 23% of the plastic. You know, that tells you a whole lot about where you should focus your efforts. So they did this in the study. I had forgot about it. But when you look at the different commodities that they pulled out and measured, when you look at this chart here, and I'm sure it's probably too small for people to see, but it broke down metal into aluminum cans and containers, aluminum plates and foils, tin, steel containers, empty paint and aerosol cans. And they had this weight and they gave it a percentage of what was going out. So the details that we did in this waste composition study was unbelievable. It was a extremely detailed survey to come up with these. And, you know, you can do it on a much smaller scale if we still want to do it based upon the curbside. So there's still some gleaning of stuff that we can get. If the committee feels like that this is enough for us, the capture rates that are here are good enough for us to tailor a campaign or give us a baseline for our campaign, that would be great. But if we still want to measure our campaign, then you do the baseline and then you measure again and you see if you've impacted it. So when we talk about an education and outreach campaign, maybe we have the pre-data, we just have to do the post data.
This is probably an excellent baseline. It's certainly detailed. What it doesn't give us is the end user of the education. It doesn't give us the knowledge of whether we need. This gives us something global for Jefferson County. It doesn't break it down into the individual recipients of the education. And I think we're going to find out that there isn't one mindset that goes throughout the county. So we might take a study that just starts looking at the different locations, the demographics of them, and whether or not whether or not we're wasting money doing education in one area and not another area.
Well, I 100% agree with what you just said, Sandra, and the fact that the way that you educate in one part of town can be totally different than another part of town. I think even with litter, all those things, it's always going to be different. People are in different positions, you know, socioeconomics, availability of services. I mean, there's so many different factors there.
Exactly.
The recommendation talks about community-based social marketing, and that, you know if you know what behaviors you're trying to get people to do, the first step is identifying the barriers and the benefits to those. And I think, to Sandra's point, those barriers are going to be different depending on where you're at.
So using what we've got, it sounds like we still have another step that we do need to have some kind of information gathering attached to.
I believe so. And, you know, the study can be very targeted into the different areas that we feel like that we have potentially a different method of education.
Exactly. Well, we're getting near the end of our meeting. I think we've given you plenty to do before we meet again in 2022.
That was fast.
Any other comments? Does anybody else want to say something? We still have one more item on the agenda. That's partially why. All right, well, let's leave the recommendation number 1 and let's go to C&D materials update.
Okay, so here's kind of where we're at on C&D. We've talked about the commodities of focus for us right now. The first one being asphalt shingles. And, you know, one of the guys that I had been talking to at Bluegrass Labs was out for a bit. I've recontacted them. They are wanting to do this, but we're kind of in limbo right now until we can get them to come up with this generic asphalt shingle mix into asphalt. And then we have to get all of the other manufacturers of asphalt to kind of say, yeah, that's an acceptable mix, and that could be something that we can get anybody in our area to use as a template into their specs when they bid work out. We're still a ways away from getting that to happen. And I suspect that we're going to have some roadblocks along the way, maybe from the industry or differences of opinion from one manufacturer to another. But it's going to have to be something that we're going to have to work out. And hopefully the Asphalt Association in Louisville, who we worked with, is going to be able to help us navigate those barriers to getting this done. So we're not quite there on the shingles. The concrete and the concrete recycling, and I think to a degree the shingle part, I think I've got a lot of hopes on the fact that Metro government is trying to become a LEED certified city. And as part of that, Metro will be doing, hopefully, right now it's in the measurement phase to find out how much material is generated, where it goes, to determine then how we can recycle it and reuse it. So a lot of this material infrastructure work that's done by government agencies hopefully will be a jump starter, because we're going to want to recycle those materials. And if we do, somebody's going to have to recycle them. So depending upon how much that is, that could be an impetus for us to start an infant industry of construction and demolition recycling in the community. And then we can kind of grow it from there. The gypsum drywall. I have not done a whole lot of work on the drywall issue, other than the fact that what we've already reported, which was that there isn't a drywall manufacturer in our region that wants gypsum, recycled gypsum, to come back into making new drywall. They say that they're looking at it, but that's not doing it. And it's still, those facilities are within the region, but they're not close. The second part of that is agricultural use of the material. And we all know that we have one of the members of the advisory committee that's very interested in doing this. I think that where I've kind of come into a roadblock is how do I get end use to pick up so that it becomes something that is of value. And I don't know exactly how to do that. So if that's, one of the suggestions from to the committee from one of the people that did this was that if you want a material that you want to find a home for it, you get you a champion, and they work on developing that end use in the community. Smith, who is it? Scott Smith Consulting, I think did a little bit of this. Smith Management Group did a little bit of this. So it could be that maybe the committee recommends that we hire a consultant to take a look at what it would take to get that off of the ground, what we would have to do in the community to do that, and to find the people that would start to use it. It's readily usable in our community as a soil amendment. I think Matt Smith is definitely interested in it. The next step of that is once you define a end user and a need, then it's creating the infrastructure to collect it and process it. And at that point, we're doing drywall, we're doing concrete, we're doing shingles. A lot of the other materials that is in the C&D stream is already recyclable, clean wood. Then we're much closer to the point where we can start to say, well, maybe we can start having construction and demolition debris, commingled recycling in the community, an industry to do that.
Peter, signing offer again. I'm familiar with a gentleman in north central Indiana that farms about 6,000 acres. And I met him on Indiana Recycling Market Development Board. But he has worked with gypsum recycling as a soil amendment at his facility. I'll try to get some contact information on him. His name's Don Lamb.
That would be good.
If he'd be willing to contribute some of his knowledge.
I'm wondering if we have a soil conservation district, Karen, do you recall? I'm wondering if a soil conservation district would be interested in giving us some, hey, you can't do that in this community, or we need this stuff, we just haven't been able to get it. I don't know. I do know that they use it in fertilizer, but I don't know. I don't know how we're going to get this in use. We just don't have the expertise here to be able to create a market, I guess. So that's my report on C&D material. I wish it was
Actually,
more
that was
detailed.
one step forward, you know, sometimes they're very small. We are now at the part of the meeting for public input. Does anybody wish to be heard on any item on the agenda? And seeing none, I wish you all very happy holidays, and our next meeting will be January 11th.
Thank you, guys. Everybody, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. And no regular committee meeting this month, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Merry Christmas. See you all.
You all.
Hi. You.